spent about 18 years in China. I mean, this is as good a time to be a venture capitalist in China as any.
No, absolutely. I always tell myself that it's better to be lucky. But really getting to China 18 years ago, being right there at the center of the growth in the China venture market, being part of the whole entrepreneurial landscape has allowed us to see and really, be at the front seat to some of the most innovative companies that we're seeing today, not just in China, but increasingly, I would say, on a global basis.
How has the landscape changed, though?
Yeah, so when we first got there in the 2000 timeframe, China's first 10 years in terms of entrepreneurial startup, they were more operating and market-focused business model. Alibaba in e-commerce, Tencent in the social side, interaction with gaming, Baidu more fundamental search. But since 2010, over the last 8 years, we have seen a huge adoption of technology. Initially, it was called Internet Plus, disrupting traditional industries like education, medical, agriculture, fintech, and now increasingly AI Plus. The Chinese entrepreneurs are very simple. They coin terms very simply, leveraging internet to disrupt, leveraging AI technology to disrupt. And so we are now seeing startups that has pretty disruptive technology and products and services. It's not just market or operating focus, but that they are coming out with brand new products that we have not seen anywhere else, in the world.
You're an early investor of Xiaomi. What do you make of the disappointing market debut of the company?
Yeah, so I've been a VC for a long time, and we have seen companies as they grow, be part of a larger entity or take their first step to being a public company. Being public is the first step in a very, very long journey. And companies is transiting from private to now having a wider base of shareholders. So I would say take a long-term perspective. Don't get too hung up about specific small time window. IPO is obviously, companies' performance is obviously based on a few factors, right? Their own performance, their ability to continue to innovate, come up with better products, expand their market beyond China to the international market. If you think about the global population, 7 billion, right? While China has 1.4 billion, that's only a portion of the global population. And so while China mobile internet penetration has gotten to, I would say, saturation point, the challenge for companies in this category, including Xiaomi, would be to be able to bring their products and services out on an international basis. So be patient, and I think the company will have to keep their heads down and continue to do what they do best, which is bringing best products most suitable for the consumer that they're targeting.
Okay, so for investors, be patient. For the company itself, for Xiaomi itself, what does it need to do to regain investor confidence?
Yeah, so as I think nothing beats being able to outperform, beat their consensus every quarter, which means that the company has to execute, right? So they have to execute, one, on ensuring that their existing consumer base is happy with the products, will continue to buy, and two, be able to, as I mentioned earlier, bring those products and services to more markets beyond China. And I think that the great internet companies that we've seen globally, they are constantly thinking about what's next. What's next after mobile? Is it the home? Is it automotive? Is it new categories that they can disrupt? So I think that's what this team, though, has had a history of really being able to pull a new vertical for them to grow. So I would say that it's a great team, and they are keeping their eyes on the ball. What it takes.
We've seen a tech sell-off in China. What do you make of valuations right now?
Yeah, so I think definitely, we're on the private market, so we tend to look at valuation on the private side and compare it to the public side. Definitely in the last, particularly this year, we've seen that the public valuation has come down, quite substantially relative to the growth of private valuation. So that's a fact. I do believe that private companies that are in the market trying to fundraise would have to adjust their expectation in terms of what it means, right? Can you continue to be multi-billion? Is it just growing on the billion side? Or is it really, let's get back to fundamentals, let's get back to growth, let's get back to innovation, and worry less about valuation on the private side. I think at some point it's gonna, the public valuation, I like to tell our companies, that Mr. Market is always right. And so even if you're a private company, you have to manage that expectation and not let private valuation tell you that you're there or that you made it.
But having said that, though, do you think Chinese tech companies can withstand the shocks in the market?
Yeah, so we've been investing in China and US for the last 18 years that I've seen. And I've seen 3 or 4 down cycles over the last 18 years. And these are global financial crisis, Asia crisis, a lot. What we have seen is that the Chinese entrepreneurs, if they have the ability to bring and grow their company to be top 3 in their category, they have gone through a lot. When the ride-sharing market kind of took off on a global basis, overnight we had a few hundred players offering ride-sharing services in China. And so for a Didi to get to category 1, right, to be the number 1 player, means that they have fought a tremendous battle in China across their peers who are highly, highly competitive. And so that allows them to build a deeper base of resilience. And when companies like that tackle the international market, when they go out, when there's a downturn, these are companies, these are the survivors, right? And they will continue to survive. And that's what we have seen, is that China is a brutal market for entrepreneurs. But when you are there and you are in that category of companies that made it, if they survive over 5 years, the next 5 years becomes easier. Not taken for granted, but definitely easier than the first 5 years.
9 of the top 20 tech companies are Chinese companies. Given Trump's attitude and policies towards Chinese tech companies, do you see that number rising still?
I think that's harder to predict. I do feel that policies can drive and support new startups. But I do believe that the market is probably the more important factor. And so Chinese entrepreneurs, startups have the advantage of addressing a huge China population. And so even if your products and services are focused domestically, food delivery in China, ride sharing in China, those should still be very good companies that is less reliant on kind of international policies. And 2, I think some of what you mentioned, some of the discussion US-China is also driving to a certain extent talent pool to migrate back to China. And so that in a way would make China stronger. When you have the right talent and you have your own domestic market, I think that this ratio may grow over time, maybe even faster.
Jenny, you're invested in Airbnb, which is currently struggling in the Chinese market. What do you make of the challenges it's facing there, and can it overcome?
Yeah, so I think that the challenge that Airbnb faces in China, it's not different from when Alibaba first goes to the US market. It's not very different from when Baidu tries to go outside of China into Japan or even in the Southeast Asian market. So when any company, Airbnb included, tries to enter a brand new market that has a different local culture, different consumer behavior, different consumer spend behavior, I think they need to quickly localize, maybe find the right team, right partner to work with. So those challenges, I would say, are pretty standard challenges. To go into China, they have to go in with their eyes wide open and then be able to rapidly adapt. I would say that Airbnb has done a very good job relative to maybe some other international companies coming to China. Going into the new market is not as simple as saying, let's just have a cookie cutter model that worked in the US, bring this international. Consumers internationally, they may not be like a US consumer. Similarly, for Chinese companies going international, they understand this as well, and so they don't face less of a challenge. But what they do is, they try and adapt locally as well.
So you think Airbnb can succeed, and if so, what time frame do you see?
I think it's harder to predict the time frame. I think China market is large enough to warrant that long-term investment, long-term patience, and then cultivation of the right management talent to address the market. The target market for Airbnb is a huge market, and it's just starting to grow for the Chinese consumer. So have patience, and then pick the right cities, pick the right go-to-market.
When you take a look at the VCs space, women VCs are hard to come by in the US, but not so in China. Tell us some of your observations.
It's very interesting. I kept going back and forth and said, ask myself why. As I mentioned, I think if you look at China entrepreneurial market, startup market 20 years ago, they were business models that were supported by operating and market-facing models. A bit more traditional, I would say, less hardcore tech. And so the first wave of VC practitioner in the market came from all different disciplines, from consulting, from mostly audit. And so China VC market started with diversity. And I think diversity breeds diversity. And so, the VC firms have grown up with a more diverse set of background for their VC entrepreneurs. Myself, I used to upgrade jets. So from a very technical background to then, going into finance. And so I think that's the difference. Whereas in the US, the Valley, be it on the venture side, it's started more with a tech a disruption, and therefore the early practitioner tends to have a harder core technology background.